How the ancient Egyptians mummified, secrets and afterlife beliefs. Chapter 1. The Body and the Soul. Deir el-Bahari, 1881. Under a collapsed shaft near the cliffs of Thebes, archaeologists unroll a linen-wrapped face. It has been buried for 3,000 years, yet the eyelashes are still visible. Resin releases a faint sweetness like old pine. The light of a lantern finds the curve of a cheek that should have surrendered to dust, and does not. The air inside the tomb is still, as if it has learned a discipline that breath forgot. In this hush, Egypt's central proposition comes into focus. A body can be persuaded to remain, and if it remains, the soul can find it again. The Egyptians named the body Khat, the visible architecture of a person, built of flesh but capable, if handled correctly, of becoming more than an anatomical fact. They spoke of the Ka, the vital essence that required food and company, and the Ba, the personality that could drift like a bird, returning each night to its familiar house of bone. They spoke of the Ak, an effective spirit in the company of the gods, made not by sentiment, but by procedure. Across millennia and dynasties, belief hardened into practice. Preserve the vessel so the forces that animated it do not disperse. This is the science of immortality in its original register. Chemistry as covenant, ritual as engineering, faith as a protocol for the afterlife. Chapter 2. Sand and Salvation. Long before priests perfected recipes and tools, the desert taught the first lesson. Around c. 3500 BCE, in shallow graves at the edge of cultivation, bodies laid straight in hot alkaline sand dried quickly enough to defy putrefaction. When graves were reopened for offerings or remembrance, families found skin still holding to bone, hair still threaded to skull. The land had performed a kind of mercy. What began as accident became aspiration. The living learned to imitate what the desert did without effort. Arrest the clock with dryness and salt. Over centuries, burial moved from open sand to constructed chambers that shielded bodies from scavengers and heat. But stone protected poorly against decay's chemistry. Bodies sealed in cool shade softened, bloated, and collapsed. An indignity that did not fit a cosmology in which the deceased ought to eat, speak, and breathe in the field of reeds. Pressed between reverence and physics, embalmers began to intervene. They observed which tissues rotted first. They learned the sermon water preaches in a corpse, and wrote their rebuttal in salt. Each improvement, an incision, an oil, a bandage, arose the way technology always does, from a stubborn refusal to accept that a problem cannot be solved. Chapter 3. The God who died to teach immortality. Osiris. All engineering requires a blueprint. Egypt's came in the form of a myth older than any manual. Osiris, good king, was murdered and dismembered by his brother, Seth. Isis and Nephthys gathered the broken parts. Anubis, jackal-headed patron of embalmers, wrapped the body, anointed it, and performed rites that opened senses silenced by death. The god revived, not to walk among the living again, but to reign in the next world. A proof of concept for resurrection. In temple reliefs and papyri, Osiris lies upon the lion-legged embalming table, while Anubis leans close. Behind them, a Djed pillar promises stability, and the green of Osiris's skin hints at renewal. Theology provided what every laboratory needs: a goal state, a sequence, a guarantee. If a god could rise through ritual and rectitude, a human might endure by imitation. Chapter 4. The Embalmer's Workshop. In a low-roofed room beyond the city's clean avenues, near running water and out of direct sun, men in linen aprons worked as both clergy and technicians. They were priests when they recited spells from the pyramid texts, coffin texts, and later the Book of the Dead. They were chemists when they measured oils and resins into carefully labeled jars. Their touch moved between sacred and practical with the same confidence. According to recent excavations at Saqqara, reported by Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in 2022, an embalming workshop included stone tables grooved to drain fluids, clay basins for natron, and ceramic vessels inscribed in hieratic with contents and instructions: oil for the head, resin for the liver, unguent for softening the skin. The first act was purification. The body was washed with palm wine, scented and antiseptic, and with Nile water that carried the memory of floods and grain. When the priest-technicians touched the corpse, their hands carried two mandates at once: cleanse and consecrate. The skin shone. The odor of life receded beneath frankincense and myrrh. A human form slowly became a material for work. Chapter 5. The Extraction of the Brain. They began where decay shouts loudest. The brain, seat of moisture, was not honored as the organ of thought. Egyptians located mind and memory in the heart, but it was treated as a threat. A bronze rod, hooked at its end, was inserted through a small opening in the nostril and guided up into the cranial cavity. The brain was scrambled and withdrawn in portions. In some periods, embalmers dissolved what remained with aromatics and rinsed it away. The empty space was then filled with resin or linen to maintain shape. In CT scans conducted between the 2010s and 2020s at institutions including the University of Zurich and the British Museum, these interventions are visible as dense fillings within skulls, clean lines where tools entered, and intact, delicate bones spared with remarkable control. The operation reads as both practical and symbolic. Remove the swamp and install a desert. Dry the temple of thought the culture did not recognize, and preserve the heart, where it believed the person truly lived. Chapter 6. The Organs of Eternity. Next came the left flank incision, a signature cut in the lower abdomen, performed with a sharp blade of metal or obsidian. Through that portal, embalmers removed the viscera most vulnerable to rot: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines. Each organ was rinsed, dried with natron, and treated with oils that resisted microbes and taught flies to seek decay elsewhere. According to Egyptological consensus preserved in museum catalogs and publications, the organs were then placed into canopic jars and entrusted to the four sons of Horus. Imseti, human-headed, guarded the liver. Hapi, baboon-headed, the lungs. Duamutef, jackal-headed, the stomach. Kebesenuef, falcon-headed, the intestines. Their lids, carved with their heads, sat beneath the guardianship of goddesses: Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Serket. The jars were not merely containers, they were contracts, each organ's safety ensured by a divine partner in perpetuity. In some later periods, false jars with painted lids disguised that the organs had been returned, wrapped, to the body. Proof that form and function could diverge as long as meaning was preserved. Chapter 7. Salt and Fire. the chemistry of natron. The body, relieved of damp machinery, was made to imitate desert again. Natron, Egypt's natural salt gathered from dry lake beds, became the workshop's central reagent. Chemically, it is a mixture of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, and sodium sulfate, a desiccant that draws water out of tissue and creates an alkaline environment hostile to the enzymes and bacteria that melt the dead. The corpse was packed and buried in natron for roughly 40 days, sometimes more. The skin tightened, the cheeks hollowed, the weight fell away. In this controlled drought, time lost its leverage. When embalmers removed the salts, they handled a human figure transformed into something neither alive nor decaying, a stable substrate upon which meaning could be written in oils and cloth. Scientific analyses of ancient residues, including work led by the British Museum and the University of Tübingen, show that Egyptians enhanced natron's effect with complex mixtures of resins and oils. Cedar oil from Levantine forests, pistacia resin, coniferous tars, beeswax that sealed surfaces, occasional bitumen for water resistance, and fragrant unguents that curbed microbes while announcing holiness. These ingredients prove a trade web as wide as a myth. Caravans and ships bringing antiseptics and perfumes across deserts and seas so that one body might be made strong against time. Chapter 8. Linen and Amulets. When the body had become dry as a good word, embalmers reversed the desert's austerity with care. They anointed the skin with oils that softened and sealed. They replaced volume lost in drying by packing cavities with linen and resin, restoring cheeks and limbs toward recognizable form. Then they wrapped. Linen strips, narrow and long, passed like gentle equations over shoulders and hips, around fingers and toes. Between layers, they placed amulets tuned to risks the soul might face. The Eye of Horus for health and completeness. The Jed Pillar for stability. The Tayet Knot of Isis for protection. The Heart Scarab, set with a spell imploring the heart to be silent on Judgment Day, to not betray its owner in the presence of scales that weighed a life against the feather of Ma'at. Labels in cursive hieratic script marked the order of wrappings and the identity of the deceased. Modern CTs and high-resolution imaging have found these ghost signatures pressed into resins, the handwriting of embalmers who worked as managers as much as mystics. The wrapping was not concealment. It was a script that made the body legible to gods. Chapter 9. The Mouth That Spoke Again. When bandages lay smooth and white, another technology began. At the threshold of the tomb, beneath a sky that remembered floods and kings, priests performed the opening of the mouth, Weper, a ritual described in pyramid and coffin texts and illustrated on the walls of tombs like those of Seti I and Tutankhamun. A Sem priest, sometimes wearing a mask of Anubis, touched the lips and eyes with a ritual adze and a fishtail-shaped blade called a peseshkef, a tool originally used in childbirth. The symbolism was transparent. As a midwife opens a womb to deliver life, so the priest opens the face to deliver voice and sight again. Libations washed the bandages. Incense fumigated through linen. Hymns summoned the senses back to their posts. The words promised practical outcomes. You will breathe. You will eat. You will see. You will speak. In modern terms, it was a reactivation protocol, a ritual interface toggling capacities on, not by electricity, but by faith firmly coupled to sequence and touch. Chapter 10. The Journey to the Duat. The wrapped and awakened body crossed a threshold into architecture shaped by maps of the next world. The Duat, a realm of gates and lakes and fire, awaited both terror and triumph. Papyrus spells stood by like written companions, some painted on the coffin in bright bands of color, some tucked as scrolls beside the thigh. The procession through the necropolis, past Shapti figurines ready to work in the fields of eternity, past canopic chests watched by gods, ended in rooms arranged like arguments against forgetting. Offering tables, false doors for souls to pass, scenes of gardens and banquets where the dead would be fed by those who remembered. The tomb was a machine, a pantry, a chapel, a theater, a vault, a map. Ancestors waited on walls. Osiris sat with patience carved in green stone. The coffin slid into a sarcophagus that was itself a body, face painted, eyes outlined in black coal, hands crossed with scepters, so that the dead could wear a second skin of wood and pigment, even as linen held the first. Chapter 11. The Science of Preservation. To a modern eye, the mastery is chemical and anatomical. Natron's alkalinity slows proteolysis. Removal of viscera removes bacterial factories. Resins seal and disinfect. Oils repel insects. Linen isolates. Tombs stabilize temperature and humidity. To an Egyptian eye, the mastery is moral. Each step preserved not only flesh, but order, ma'at, the right relation between things. The heart's survival mattered because it would be weighed. The tongue's survival mattered because it would speak truth. Even the choice to leave the heart in place while removing the brain encodes a theory. Reason and memory reside in the chest, not the head. Analytical chemistry has decoded the embalmers' recipes with surprising detail. Studies published by European and Egyptian teams in the early 2020s identified compounds with antibacterial and antifungal power in elite embalming mixtures. Pistacia resin's phenolics inhibit growth. Cedar oil's terpenes repel insects. Beeswax provides a moisture barrier. These were not accidents of perfume. They were deliberate pharmacology conducted at industrial scale. Linen rolls numbered, jars labeled for sequence, workshops organized by function. Saqqara's 2022 finds of vessels inscribed, "For the head, to make lovely, for the aroma," corroborate the textual record and reveal supply chains that reach the Levant and beyond. The science lives beneath the prayer. The prayer gives the science its aim. Chapter 12. Modern Forensics and CT Revelation. Time, which mummification resists, assists a different kind of knowledge. Computed tomography and microscopy at museums and hospitals over the last decade have made the opaque transparent without a surgeon's blade. CT images of Amenhotep I, for example, revealed a face serene under cloth, dental work in place, amulets arranged like constellations across the chest. According to published scans and reconstructions by teams in Cairo and Zurich, facial reconstructions of Ramesses II and other royals approximate the living presence in a way that collapses centuries into seconds. A broken bone shows a lifetime of labor. Calcifications speak of disease. A bead lodged near a collarbone tells of an amulet dislodged during wrapping and left because it now belonged where it landed. Chemical mapping of residues inside skulls has confirmed resins used to fill cranial cavities. Thread counts and weave patterns in linen layers have revealed procurement and workshop organization. Even pollen trapped in bandages whispers the season of death. Everything the embalmers touched is evidence. Everything they added can be measured. The result is a conversation across 3 millennia between two sciences that recognize each other. Theirs, which kept a body intact. Ours, which reads what they wrote. Chapter 13. The Democratic Afterlife. At first, such feats of preservation were the privilege of kings and courtiers. Tombs in the early dynastic period and Old Kingdom broadcast an inequality of eternity. For commoners, the sans impartiality had to suffice. But by the New Kingdom, access widened. Spells once reserved for royal walls appeared on papyri sold to merchants. Coffins with painted eyes became more common. Families pooled wealth to buy resins and linen in quantities that would have seemed princely 1,000 years earlier. In death as in life, markets moved, workshops scaled. While the finest ingredients and most elaborate nested coffins still honored the highest ranks, ordinary Egyptians could now claim a future joined to the same logic. The god's attention is attracted by correct procedure. A body, if properly prepared, can hold a soul no less than a palace holds a king. The ideology adjusted to kindness. Anubis, who had been a guardian of thresholds, became a patron of all who crossed. The goddess Ma'at, whose feather weighed lives, stood not only beside pharaohs but beside scribes and carpenters. Archaeological finds of mummy portraits in the Greco-Roman period, faces painted in encaustic on wood with startling naturalism, demonstrate an evolving visual theology that still kept the core technical promises: desiccation, resin, wrapping, rites. Customs shifted with empire. The vow to outlast time did not. Chapter 14. When death became an industry. The scale demanded organization. Embalming districts arose near necropolias. Guilds of embalmers maintained recipes and rites. Contracts were written, literal documents, some preserved, that stipulate what a family buys. Washing, a number of days in natron, a number of bandages, a wooden or stone coffin. Offerings paid over years. Temple economies depended on these agreements. Embalming workshops employed potters, weavers, perfumers, carpenters, painters, priests. According to papyri and ostraka, hieratic notes on linen and jar labels functioned as a logistics system that would not embarrass a modern warehouse. In every direction, supply chains for cedar, pistacia, natron, training for sem-priests and lector priests, texts copied and modified for changing tastes. Mummification proves itself not an eccentric artifact, but a primary industry, a civic technology directed toward metaphysics. It had consequences beyond religion. The demand for natron linked extraction sites to the Nile. The demand for resin linked Egypt to Levantine forests. The demand for skilled labor stabilized neighborhoods around necropolis for generations. Death built towns, ritual paid wages, eternity generated invoices. Chapter 15. Epilogue. Flesh that defied time. A modern conservator steps into a museum gallery before opening hours. The bone-white lamps are still dark. The day has not yet warmed the glass. Before her stands a coffin painted with lapis blues and golds, eyes wide, hands crossed in a gesture learned from gods. She has seen the CTS, read the chemistry, traced each bandage's root in grayscale slices. She knows the names of the resins and the measurements of the natron's salts and the provenance of the oils. She knows the hieratic marks that told an embalmer which jar to lift next and which prayer to speak. She knows the heartbeat of modern scanners as well as an ancient priest knew the cadence of a chant. And still, when she raises the shade and the first light touches the painted face, she feels what a family in Thebes felt once: recognition. Modern analyses have made the ingredients of immortality legible. According to published results from 2020 to 2023, elite embalming recipes blended cedar oil, pistacia resin, coniferous oils, beeswax, and antimicrobial compounds in proportions that make sense to a pharmacologist as well as a priest. CT scans reveal precision in organ removal and wrapping that an anatomist must admire. New excavations at Saqqara have delivered vessels labeled for use, matching what the old texts promise. All the evidence converges on a truth that refuses to be quaint. This was science yoked to myth, logistics married to longing, chemistry pledged to a moral order that held the world steady. To preserve the body was to preserve ma'at, the balance between all things. To dry a corpse until it mimicked the desert, and then rehydrate its meaning with oils, was to tell death, "You do not get the last word." In the field of reeds, a plow waits, a table is set. A voice returns because a tool kissed a mouth and a prayer attached itself to cloth. We can name the sodium carbonate, the sodium bicarbonate, the sodium chloride, the sodium sulfate. We can map the resin's terpenes and the thread's twist. We can register the heart's persistence as not merely symbolic but material. And still the most honest sentence may be the simplest. The eyelashes are still visible. Outside, the Nile turns beneath a sky thick with swallows. It has fed every experiment in permanence that Egypt ever attempted, and it has outlived them all. The river keeps its appointments. The desert keeps its counsel. Between them, a civilization engineered a third geography, the stable country of the dead, where flesh becomes a document, and a face can be read by a child 3,000 years later, and recognized as kin. In that reading, the bargain with eternity holds. The embalmers are long gone. Their workshops are dust. But their work is not. The bodies they remade remain, threaded to the souls they were meant to summon, like lanterns left burning in an endless corridor. And when we stand before them, in tomb or museum, we enter the same corridor and feel the same air. Resin, linen, and the faint, stubborn scent of forever.